Welcome to the Hymn of Ash and Echo. Before the story begins, a brief message. By decree of Adam, one of my earliest subscribers and the channel's crypt keeper, I wrote this story, as with everything on the channel. But the voice you're hearing is AI, a stand-in while I continue my voice acting training. If you enjoy these stories, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It truly helps the channel grow, and it tells me what you want more of in the future. Now, the collapse continues. This is Ruthless Survive, a zombie short story. Steven and his crew crouched behind a car, watching the two zombies shamble toward them. Their moans and grunts vibrated in his chest, each sound tightening his grip on the wrench. Sweat slicked his palms. Noah shifted beside him, knuckles white around his hammer. Norm swallowed hard enough for Steven to hear. Tim trembled like a leaf caught in a cold draft. We don't need to fight, Steven told himself. Not yet. Not for two. He could see 3 more zombies drifting aimlessly by the far curb. If they engaged the first pair, they'd pull the others. And then the street. And then the block. Maybe they could just slip around, move quietly, disappear across the street. Movement caught his eye. Larry and his group shadows slipping between cars, positioning, preparing, ready to strike. Noah leaned forward, ready to join them. Steven grabbed his arm, shaking his head. Barry sprang up, Larry hot on his heels, and behind them, the 2 older men followed. 4 attackers against 2 zombies, but all it took was one mistake. The zombies lunged, their moans twisting into snarls as they hurled themselves forward. Steven felt something cold clamp around his heart. Why should he risk everything for Barry? For the psycho he had hated for years? Or for that bastard Larry who undermined him? Snatched the promotion for himself? Fuck them, he mouthed and turned away. Leah grabbed his sleeve, shaking her head as she pointed toward the 4 men who were seconds from being overrun. Her eyes screamed, "We can't just leave them!" But Steven ignored her. He broke into a crouched run deeper into the street. Away from the wreckage, away from Larry and Barry, away from the fight he had no intention of joining. Noah was right behind him, Norm close after. Leah lingered a heartbeat longer, anguish carved across her features, before she too fled after them. Steven moved behind a line of parked cars, keeping low, each step a prayer. The moans didn't rise behind them. He risked a glance back. The 4 men were locked in brutal combat spears flashing, bodies straining, death snapping at their throats. Steven turned away, jaw tightening. "Let the fighters fight," he told himself. "The rest of us survive." The 3 zombies in front of them howled. Steven froze, heartbeat in his ears. The zombies hurled themselves forward, his whole body tensed up. The hammer in his hand twitching. Things flew right past them, sprinting at Larry and his crew. Steven sagged. His legs wobbled as he turned to look after the sprinting zombies. Larry stood in the middle of the street, and their eyes met. The man's eyes were wide, disbelieving, before they grew as hard as stone, and he turned, slamming the wrench down. Steven started turning again when he saw Tim standing in the street, trembling violently, the hammer slack in his hand. The fool froze. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He just stood there like an idiot. "We can't save him," Steven told himself. "We can't save everyone." He pushed them south, home. They had to reach their families. Dying for people he disliked was stupid. Something metal hit the floor. They all turned. Leah tripped, hit the ground hard, and lost her grip on her weapon and bag. Time seemed to stop, to stretch, to break around them as the woman lay there for a second or two. Dazed, confused, and unmoving. All her supplies sprawled before her. She finally shuddered. Her head slowly rose, half her face red, a tiny pebble embedded in her cheek. Steven took a step forward, eyes glancing up towards Larry and the dead zombies, at frozen Tim and the mass moving behind him. "Steven," Leah reached for him, her hand extended. Stephen grabbed the woman's wooden bat and bag, the things they would need. The things he couldn't abandon. Her, on the other hand, she wasn't his problem. "Please," she said, wide eyes filling with tears. A phone rang. Growls rose from the streets around them. "Fuck," Stephen thought and ran. Norm and Noah did too, leaving Leah lying there on the floor, her hand still extended, her eyes still wide, shocked and terrified. Leah's scream didn't follow them. That was the first thing Stephen noticed as he ran, shoes striking pavement, lungs scraping against his ribs. No scream, no cry for help, no begging, just the growls rising all around them. Maybe she got up. Maybe she hid. Maybe she died in silence. "Not my problem," Stephen told himself. She slowed us down. She dropped her bag. She dropped her weapon. She fell. That wasn't on him. That wasn't on any of them. Still, the lack of sound hollowed his chest. "Stephen!" Noah hissed. Stephen snapped out of it and saw it. Dozens of zombies emerging from side alleys, breaking around the parked cars, and hurtling down the street. His brain shot to the right for a moment. It couldn't comprehend the mass coming at them. "Down!" Noah rolled under a delivery van. Stephen followed, eyes glued to the mass of bloody faces, to the death incarnate, and behind it, home. His home. 4 blocks. 4 cursed, blood-slick blocks. The phone kept ringing, echoing between buildings like a beast's roar. Growls and sprinting steps answered it. "What do we do?" Norm whispered, but his voice was a bit too high. Stephen couldn't look away. He couldn't stop staring at the torn and bloody feet slapping the pavement around them. That mass of undead would eat Leah, Larry, and Barry up. But not us, Stephen thought. But not me. "South," Stephen breathed. "We keep going." "What about—" Norm started. "Don't," Stephen snapped. "We can't help her now." They all knew it. They all saw it. Leah was lying sprawled on the pavement, dazed, weaponless, a horde closing in on her. She was dead, or worse, one of the undead. The ringtone sliced through the night like a blade. The growls swelled instantly, converging like sharks smelling blood. If they had stayed even a second, they would have died with her. "Doesn't matter," Stephen told himself again, pulling in breath. She knew the risks. She came this far. She slowed us down. Norm nodded, though the lines around his mouth tightened. Noah didn't nod. He stared at the ground, body tensing and relaxing as the man slowly but surely regained composure. "We move," Stephen repeated, his voice clear and commanding, as it always ought to be. He turned back to the street again, waiting for the perfect moment. Timing was everything. The phone went silent. Snarls, grunts, and footsteps swallowed a single, suffocating moment of quiet. The 2 men flinched, but not he. He was focused on the now empty street. It was time. Stephen forced his legs to move. The 3 men crouch-ran from car to trucks, glancing left and right. But there were no more zombies to be found. They basically ran through the whole block without seeing any of the things. How? Stephen thought, sliding in behind an overturned taxi. Could they all have been drawn away by the sound? Stephen checked the side alley, but it too was empty. Could we be so lucky? Stephen rushed out of the cover and into the next one. Then the next one, seeing nothing but blood smeared and dead bodies on the street, but still hearing them. Always hearing the moans and grunts, distant and ever-present. "Where are they?" Norm whispered. "After the phone," Noah said. Stephen nodded, checking the street around them. Again, nothing. Well then, he thought, and ran. Not from cover to cover, but down the middle of the street. Running past parked and overturned cars, shattered glass littering the street, and bodies, so many bodies. But not me, he thought, pushing forward to the intersection. He glanced left and right. Again saw nothing. No zombies in sight, and what a sight it was. Familiar buildings, cars, and trees. Everything that held good memories, now decorated by blood and carnage. And still he smiled, running across it. Only 3 blocks left. Only 3 blocks, and he would be safe. Only 3 blocks, and he would be home. See his wife and kids again. A silhouette moved to their right. Stephen's legs moved on their own volition, flying over the last 5 feet of open space and behind a big van. He slid to a stop. Norm and Noah just a step behind him. A single man crouch ran past their hiding spot, looking around and sprinting up the street, being chased by nothing. Stephen slowly stood, looked around, then moved on. Back on track, rushing over the street. The 2 others followed. They ran down the middle of the road, glancing left and right, making sure nothing came at them. And nothing did. Larry's little phone stunt had worked again. Too bad it killed him too. But again, it was his own damned fault that he came back to help. Stephen wouldn't have done that. Nor should anyone else. Not back before the world went to shit. And sure as hell not now. Stephen crouched next to a building. They reached yet another intersection. He looked around it only to see abandoned cars, dead men and women, and no zombies. He almost laughed as he stood. He all but danced across yet another block, now recognizing even the tiny things. A fire hydrant his kids climbed on the mailbox with the sticker, Lara, his daughter, liked to slap. A little mini-mart, Carl, his son, adored, partly for the toys, partly for the free swirls he would get. And many more things he and Rebecca would see on their daily walks. He almost heard her laugh, tiny and shy. He almost heard his kids arguing about ice cream. That, however, was only in his head. The distant moans, though, those were real. Only 2 blocks, he thought. Only 2 blocks of dead separated him and his home. Only 2 blocks, and he would be safe. And they too. I'm coming home, he thought, speeding his pace up. A bottle rolled under his foot and clinked. The men froze. A growl broke the night. Stephen shuddered, blood freezing in his veins, eyes scanning the street around him. But he saw nothing. Noah's head turned left and right, eyes searching the street. Norm rushed for cover, beelining straight towards a truck. Sure as hell not keeping quiet, Stephen didn't either. He sped up his pace, still running down the middle of the street. He never saw it coming. Neither did Norm, as a small female zombie tackled the man, growling and snarling as the 2 hit the ground and rolled. It ended with her on top of Norm, nails reaching for his neck. But the man fought back, grunting as he tried and failed to kick the thing away. Stephen's eyes grew wide, his heart threatening to break out of his chest as he watched Norm fight for his life, as he watched the man's hands give in. "Help!" he shrieked. Distant growls answered, and Stephen ran, leaving him there to die. Noah joined him, and they cleared another block as the screams cut through the air. More growls rose, distant shapes closing in. Noah stumbled. His feet dragged for 2 steps, then 3, before Stephen grabbed his arm and yanked him behind a parked white garbage truck. "Don't stop!" Stephen hissed, grabbing the metal ladder. Growls, snarls, and steps closing in. Noah swallowed, eyes wide and wild. "Norm is dead," Stephen said. The words tasted like rust and bile. "We'd be next." Noah stared at him, not comprehending and not climbing. "Up!" Stephen snarled, glancing at the coming zombies. Noah finally moved. The screams finally stopped. They didn't fade. They cut. 1 second raw, begging sound. The next, nothing. Then that too was swallowed by snarls and growls. Noah stared past him, back the way they came. Back to the block where Leah fell. Back to the street where Norm screamed. Back to the wreckage where Larry played hero. Nobody was coming to save them. Nobody ever had. We could have... No, Stephen snapped. We couldn't. Not with that many around. Not with all this. He waved at the street, the cars, the bodies, the blood, the feasting zombies. They tore Norm to shreds, piece by piece, blood flowing between the things, glistening in the light. You want to die for them? For him? Noah's jaw clenched. He didn't answer. Stephen didn't wait for one. He peeked over the truck. The street ahead was anything but quiet. Moans and growls filled their ears, like an endless chorus of death. A curtain of smoke drifted from a burned-out car, maybe half a block down, turning the air hazy. Shapes could hide in that. Things could move. But then again, he glanced at 7 undead, gnawing on Norm's flesh. They came directly out of that mist. If there were more inside, they would have come running. Right? Maybe my luck will hold. For a block and a half, he thought. Then the corner. Then his building. Then his family. Real safety. He glanced at the distracted zombies again. It was now or never. Timing is everything. If we stay here, we die, he muttered. Move. He didn't check if Noah followed this time. He climbed down and scuttled around the truck, out of their sight, and moved, hugging the line of cars, keeping low, listening, and running as silently as he could. And yet, every footstep still felt too loud. Every scrape of his boot on glass sounded like a growl. Every breath of smoke-filled air felt like nails in his throat and lungs. They passed a storefront with shattered glass and a mannequin lying on its side, half its plastic face smashed off. Noah flinched away from it as if it might lunge. Keep going, Stephen said, eyes watering, eyes ahead. You keep saying that, Noah breathed. Like it's easy. It's not, Stephen said. Do it anyway. He didn't add, it's the only thing you are good for. They broke out of the smoke, right as they reached the corner. Stephen risked a full look. There it was, his street, same cracked sidewalks, same leaning lamppost that the city never fixed, same corner deli with the faded awning, same brick facades, different smell. He tasted copper on the air, and rot, and smoke. His stomach twisted. We are close, Noah whispered. Looking straight ahead, Stephen nodded, throat tight. One more block. He stepped out from behind the corner, wrench held low, ready to swing. The street wasn't empty, not like the others. Too many parked cars, too many spots he couldn't see. A stroller lay tipped over on its side. A bicycle lay on the curb, back wheel still spinning slowly in the night breeze. No bodies. That was worse. Something's wrong, Noah whispered. Everything is wrong, Stephen thought. But he nodded anyway. They crept forward now. Every sense stretched thin. Moans their ears. But no growl. No answering sprint. Stephen forced his legs to move again. Past a bench he and Rebecca usually sat at. Past the little patch of greenery where he and Carl had planted a little tree last year. Past a little hidey hole where he saw Lara kiss a boy from school. Oh, how mad he had been. Oh, how he screamed and threatened and cussed. Oh, how he wished he could go back to that moment again. They pushed on, past countless other memories, and straight into a dozen undead, standing huddled together, all swaying left and right, bumping into each other and the open door of his building, dark blue and covered in blood. He stopped, mind not able to comprehend what he was seeing. Noah grabbed his arm and pulled him back. Stephen stumbled into cover, shivering and shaking, still unable to think, still unable to comprehend what he just saw. Zombies, dozens of them, at the open entrance to his building. They were dead, he thought. Rebecca, Carl, and Lara were dead. Stephen slumped against the car. This all was for nothing. They were dead, and there was no safety to be found. His mind turned cruel, menacing. It showed him images of his wife, tearing into their children, blood running down her face as she sank her teeth into Carl's neck. Noah nudged him. Stephen didn't move. He stared at the pavement, seeing in his mind's eye how Rebecca was eating Lara, tearing her arm off, just like the zombies had done to Norm. His throat tightened, his vision blurred. "Hey," Noah whispered into his ear, barely audible but there. "Get a grip." Stephen shook his head. What was the point? Rage ignited in his gut. It was all that fool Larry's fault. If they had headed here immediately, his family would still be alive. But no, they waited till night fell. No, they wandered aimlessly through the street, following a psycho and a moron. "Did you see them?" Noah asked. "What?" Stephen looked up. What a stupid fucking question. Of course he hadn't. They were inside, and he was outside. He blinked the blurriness away. Right, he thought, sitting up. They were not amongst the dead. Stephen peeked around the parked car, looking for her heart-shaped face among the bloody ones. No, Rebecca wasn't amongst them. Hope rose in his gut. Neither were their kids, so they could still be alive. "They are alive," Stephen said to himself, pulling back. But how to get to them? No, he whispered. His mind focused on the zombies. They couldn't walk around them. They couldn't go through them. "We need to lure them away," he muttered. "My thoughts exactly," Noah whispered. "Let's use a phone." Stephen nodded, looking around. Where could they put it so it would be loud enough to draw the things away and keep them there? The smoke. His head snapped to the corner. Yes, that would work, Stephen thought, turning back to the dozens of zombies. "The smoke?" he suggested. Noah nodded, staring at the corner. "But how to get it there?" "You walk," Stephen whispered. Noah's head snapped back, eyes narrowed and accusatory. "What?" the man asked slowly. You go there, put your phone into the smoke, then come back," Stephen said, looking him in the eye. "And after you do, I will call your number." The man shook his head. "I will do the same for your family." "Why don't you go?" he asked. "Would your wife open the door for me?" Stephen asked. Noah shook his head, still not comprehending. "Rebecca won't open for you either. I got a key." He produced the key from his pocket. "And time is of the essence. I know the building by heart." "And we don't go in together?" Noah asked. Stephen nodded. Then it makes no sense," the man said. "What if something goes wrong? What if you or I have to run into the building?" Stephen said. "Who has a better chance of reaching my family, or yours later?" Noah glanced at the zombies, then back at Stephen. Eyes narrowed, but the man nodded. "Good man," Stephen said. Noah took a deep breath, watching the horde rock back and forward. He shivered and moved. Stephen looked after him for a moment, as the man hid behind cars and debris, his phone already in his hand as the man disappeared behind a taxi. Stephen turned to the apartment building, his mind focusing on the next steps. As soon as Noah returned, they called the number, and the masses would rush after it. Plus, the door was open, meaning any zombies in the building would rush out after the noise. We could close the door, Stephen thought, secure it. He glanced after Noah and stay inside. But would the man agree? Probably not. Stephen watched Noah cross the road, moving slowly and carefully but relentlessly. No, he would insist. Stephen looked up his building, where his wife and kids were safe and sound, away from the mess. And with the downstairs door closed and all the zombies out, all of them would be safe. And he should throw all of that away? For what? Noah? Fuck no. He wouldn't force his kids into the streets. He simply wouldn't. Stephen turned to Noah just in time to see the man disappear into the smoke, ready to plant the phone and rush back. It was probably already unmuted, but probably wasn't enough. Stephen waited, eyes locked on the smoke, waiting patiently. Noah finally stepped out it, head moving left and right. Their eyes locked, and the man smiled, giving him a thumbs up. What a fool, Stephen thought, pulling his phone out. Just like Larry, Stephen thought, looking for Noah's smile. "Your Ruthless Survive," he muttered, and called the number. Now, Like always, timing was everything, and Stephen timed it perfectly. The sound tore through the night, loud, shrieking, and all-encompassing. Noah's eyes went wide, his step faltering, the smile slipping. The zombies responded to the call, snarling and sprinting. Directly at Noah, the man just stood there, unmoving, eyes darting between the mass and Stephen. Fear and panic etched into his face. Stephen crouched behind the car, watching the mass sprint at the man. And Noah finally moved. He ran into the smoke. But it was too late. 3 more rushed out of the building, joining the others and snarling and spitting blood all the way to the smoke. All the way to Noah. The call ended. But it didn't matter anymore. The zombies were on the move. They found their next prey. Stephen waited for another second, then 3. And good that he did. Another zombie rushed out of the building, head turning left and right, listening for the sound. Noah screamed. The zombie snarled and ran into the smoke. Stephen checked the street, rushed over it, and into his building. He closed the door, and it clicked. The locking mechanism still worked. Perfect, he breathed, slowly turning to face his building. The walls and floors were covered in blood, eaten men and women all around him. But they didn't matter. Not to him, at least. He ran up the first flight of stairs, then the second, and reached it. The 3rd floor and the white door at its end. Bloody face and fingerprints marred the white door, but it was still intact. Stephen ran across the bloodied tiles, next to a half-eaten body, and reached his apartment. He didn't even waste a second. He unlocked the door and rushed in, letting it fall close as he opened his mouth to call out to them. A rancid, sickly wave of rot hit him like a fist. Stephen gagged, stumbling back, slipping on the bloody tiles, and slamming shoulder first into the door. A snarl tore through the apartment. Rebecca burst out of the living room, her heart-shaped face smeared in dried and fresh blood. Long, slender fingers reached for him, and her wedding ring flashed bright gold in the dark. Stephen swung on reflex. The wooden bat cracked against her jaw, snapping teeth, sending her head whipping against the wall. She staggered, but didn't fall. Carl tackled him. The boy slammed into his chest with horrifying force, knocking both down. They went down in a heap, slamming against walls and the door. Tiny nails clawed into his arm and cheek, while teeth snapped inches from his throat. Stephen shoved him away, scrambling for the hammer on his belt. Lara climbed onto him like she used to when she wanted to be picked up. Except now her jaw clamped around his shoulder. Stephen screamed, punching his daughter as Carl tore into his shin. Rebecca threw herself onto the pile, the weight crushing the breath from his lungs. Her teeth found his neck. Warm blood sprayed the wall, the floor, the door he had closed behind him to keep death out. But death had already found its way in. It always had. And in the end, karma is a bitch. You've just listened to Ruthless Survive, a short story from The Collapse, where regular people face the most irregular situation, a zombie outbreak in New York City. I post new stories twice a week, and for the next few weeks, The Collapse will be pulling double duty. That's 2 zombie stories every week. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.